Hi there, this is the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. Welcome to another edition of this podcast about all things bonsai. So this episode is going to focus on some summer setbacks and how to learn from them, what to focus on and what not to focus on more particularly, and also a little bit more about my Japan bonsai learnings from my early days. And it should be an interesting chat. So thank you, as always, for tuning in, and let's get right into it. Now, no matter which way you look at it, summer is brutal. I'm based in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and we are smack in the middle of our summer period. The temperatures are getting warm. We have particularly dry summers here, but currently experiencing a bit of a humid patch. So there's issues that come with that, but more importantly, the strong, dry northerly winds that tend to come off inland and wreak havoc on the bonsais by drying them out particularly quickly are ramping up. So things need to be organised and managed and prepared for. And my approach to my bonsai and how I look after them, it starts caring for summer or getting ready for summer starts a long, long time ago. It doesn't start in the last few weeks. It starts back from repotting years ago, where I focus on the root structure of the tree and the tree's ability to transpire, to take water through its system, which is the primary method it's the only method for stopping leaf damage, or needle burn. So I focus everything that I seem to do throughout the year with my bonsai is based around getting ready for what we're experiencing now, which is the heat of summer. So if you're in northern hemisphere, well, it's great. You've got 6 months up your sleeve to plan for it if you haven't already, which would be quite rare, because a lot of people do worry about summer being particularly damaging time for their trees, and a lot of it, from my experience, comes from focusing on water retention with your bonsai as opposed to root growth. If you get the root growth, then the roots can take the moisture, get the moisture up, then you don't have to worry about these hot days. So I've got a lot of bonsai. I've got, I don't know, something like 400 or something like that. To be honest, I'm too scared to count. But they range in size from tiny little ones to enormous trees over a metre tall. Some around the 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 metres. So they're too big and there's too many for me to pick up and move on extreme weather days. So I need to make sure that I've got everything set right before these things come from. And that's the first point that I want to make, is that when it comes to summer, or when it comes to anything, whether it's time away from your trees or having a holiday, something like that, that you've got to prepare for the worst. You've got to plan for the worst and make sure that you've got everything in place to ensure that if and when a disaster happens, that you're covered for it. And that includes simple things like, tying your trees down to the benches or podiums or platforms or whatever they're sitting on at the moment. So when we do get a strong wind and you're somewhere away from your trees, whether it be at work or, you're out for a weekend trip or you're away for a longer period, that the trees hopefully don't blow over, don't break their bond and blow over. That's the goal with tying your trees down. Because if it does happen, and you do have the facility to check on the trees, someone might pop around and say, hey, bad news, your trees are all on the ground. What do? Do you cancel your holiday, head back? Do you get someone who doesn't know bonsai to start repotting your trees or taping up pots and that sort of thing? Or do you have cameras when you're away that you can check on them, like what's happened to me in the past, where I definitely have had trees blow over and they've blown over and broken the tie downs that I've used on the trees. So, I plan for the worst, but, stuff happens. It really does with bonsai, and you've just got to make sure that you roll with the punches. And that's what I want to look to next, is that don't let one backward step or one negative thing happen that occurs during the summer period be a major setback for you with your bonsai journey. For instance, trees blow over, or there's a sprinkler system failure and a tree dies. Sure, you can be upset about it. You can worry about it, and you can mourn the loss of that tree. You can really be annoyed, for want of a polite word, but you've got to be able to move on at some point. You can't let that define what's happened, because there's a lot of good stuff that you've done with your trees throughout the year, and I think that these negative setbacks that generally tend to happen around this time of year, where every little weakness in your system raises its ugly little head over the extreme temperature that we cop, then they shouldn't be defining moments. They should be learning opportunities. If it's let's say I had this conversation the other day with a fellow that a tree that was on the path to becoming something pretty special. It was in a position where the sprinkler system failed, and it was like, damn, it's died. Like, it's not coming back. It's just gone too long. Even though the system itself worked, just that one particular area of the watering system failed. So we talked about it, and we sort of looked for an opportunity to say, well, okay, what would you do different next time? And it's next time you'd run a second line that covers that area as well, maybe with a different type of sprayer head or dripper system or whatever it is, something that's more allows for a redundancy, allows for some error in one line is covered by a second line. And then we also talked about what I do with my trees, with my watering system is, I'll have each bonsai covered by two different sprinkler lines, which are covered off two different tap systems, which are covered off two different solenoid systems, which have two different types of sprayer heads, whether it's a misting system or whether it's a dripper or a sprayer or whatever it is. So each tree is covered by two things. So for one to go, that's bad luck. For two to go, that's really super bad luck. But then what I do is for each of my areas too, I'll have a general watering system, say a ground sprinkler, which will be enough to cover all the trees within that zone. So there's sort of like a third safety stop. It wouldn't be enough to allow the trees to fully thrive on their own, the third system that I've got, but it's definitely something that's better than nothing for that period that it would take me to get home or to get somebody to get to my system to make repairs if I was, out of country or out of state or whatever it is. So I think that you can look at what went wrong, you can learn from it, and you can correct it. So fingers crossed it doesn't happen again. I mean, that's continual improvement, which is what everyone strives for, whether it's in your personal life or it's your business life or whatever it is. There's always that aim to continually improve things and get better and stronger, and that's what we want for our bonsai all around. So this time of year is when you get to find your weaknesses, but the rest of the year is when I actually plan and prepare and put things in place for this period of time. So, I try and make sure that, the bonsai that are damaged or, worst case scenario, killed from one of these disasters, these bonsai disasters, that it's getting less and less all the time. And you can't prevent accidents. That's why they're called accidents. And you definitely don't, you don't deliberately plan in your own mind to have something like this go wrong. So like I said, my approach is that, and my advice is that, yeah, sure, you can be upset by it. And you can, like I said, you can mourn what's happened, but you've got to compartmentalize it. You've got to lock that away, and you've got to be able to move on from that at some point or another. Otherwise, there's no point having this living art form that we love so much and we enjoy spending time with, because things do go wrong. It's going to happen throughout your entire bonsai journey. And yeah, look, you can, I had a conversation with a fellow last night that was talking about, this tree, I bought it a long time ago and I loved it, and it died, and I still think about it now, 10, 15, 20 years later. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. You can learn from it. And I think you can use something like that as a push or a motivator to never let it happen again. Never walk away from watering your trees. Never walk away from fertilizing. Never walk away from managing pest and disease. All the things that we have to do with our bonsai. but don't use it as something which cripples you from taking that next step forward with your trees. Like, don't say to yourself, because that tree died, I'm never going to buy a high quality, expensive bonsai because that one died, and I'm sure all the ones in the future will die. Well, that's just not going to happen. Bonsai's a path, bonsai's a journey, and it's like building a house, one brick at a time. All these things that we learn and we compound and we put together goes towards building the biggest structure in the world, which is our bonsai knowledge database that we can call upon and grow from and develop our trees and let our passion flare. So anyway, I just want to talk about summer setbacks because we all have them. I've had my share. I've certainly had a couple this year as well, which I sort of kick myself in the bum for, and I mourn. But like I said, I have to be able to lock that away and move on. Otherwise, what's the point? So don't let it get you down. And if you're not in the summer period when you're listening to this, then make sure that you prepare for it in the best way you possibly can. The last piece of advice that I've got when it comes to summer, and particularly summer focuses a lot on watering systems. Best piece of advice I'll give you: don't skimp. Don't buy rubbish. Don't buy cheap, because you might get away with it once where some crappy little watering system works. You might get away with it twice, but somewhere, and I can tell you from experience and I can tell you from the amount of people that contact me about it, sooner or later it will come back to bite you in the bum and you will pay the price. I think that if you go for number one thing that you look for shouldn't be price when it comes to watering systems, it should be reliability. And if you can get that reliability factor ticked off on every single component of your watering system, then, sure, you might not be able to afford it all in one hit, and you might have to scrimp and save, and you might have to do it over a period of time. That's my advice. That's exactly what I would do. I wouldn't go, well, yeah, that system's, $500, but this one here's $50. And I can afford $50, so I'll get $50. You're better off saving the $50 and putting it away and going, what I'm going to do is it's going to take me 6 months, 12 months to get there, but I'm going to be putting that $50 away and compounding another 50 until I can get to the value that I need to get a reliable watering system. And when it comes to you thinking about your watering system and how much you'll put into it, just think if you lost every single tree in your bonsai collection, what that would cost you. Not only like monetary value, but emotionally. There's a lot tied up with your trees as years go on. So I would strongly suggest that you don't skimp and save on meals, going out for dinner. Don't skimp and save on watering systems when it comes to your bonsai. Right, back to Japan. So this part will wrap up the initial trip that I had back in 2012, and honestly, I still pinch myself. I was reading through some of my notes over the last couple of days of my last period of my stay there, and some of the things that were discussed and fine tuned and nutted out. I honestly wonder whether I would have been shown the techniques or would have ever learnt them if I hadn't been in that environment, if I hadn't been with those people, if I hadn't immersed myself in it, if I hadn't shown myself to being open and willing to just be a sponge for everything, whether it would have even been talked about. There was one of the things that was covered off was the technique for tying trees into a pot, which until that point I hadn't really thought about it as a skill or a technique, but it's like anything. I've said it before. You don't know what you don't know, and once I was shown, or once it was explained to me and really presented to me in a way to show the benefit of doing it, the lack of stopping movement of a newly repotted tree, allowing the roots to grow as strong as they possibly could without damaging the new roots, factoring in environmental situations like wind moving trees around and stuff like that, and allowing the tree to be in a perfect position to get as strong as it possibly could. Yeah, when you say it like that, it's a really important technique to learn. And it's like anything. It's like wiring. It's like pruning. It's like, any component of that requires a skill in what we do with our bonsai. And I'd put this into the horticultural, segment as opposed to the artistic segment. But like I say, the horticultural part is the most important part, so you can then get to the artistic side, because if you can't get the horticultural side of caring for bonsais right, then the artistic side takes an absolute hit, because you can't get the foliage that you need to be artistic with, because you don't have a solid enough base or a strong enough bonsai, a strong enough tree to be able to use it and manipulate it the way that we want to use the artistic side of bonsai. So, going through the notes, it's looking at simple things like, how do you tie in a tree that's got 4 holes in a pot, 2 holes, 3 holes, 1 hole? What if there's not enough holes in the pot? How do you add extra holes into the pot? And it was I suppose a really eye-opening thing for me that I'd just finished working on an old white pine that I was given to style and shape and bend, and it worked out being Mr. Tanaka, the master, the owner of ITN. It was something that was grown by his great-grandfather, which luckily I didn't find out till after I'd worked on it, because I don't think I would have had the courage to have done it in the first place, to be honest, because, it's different. I would have seen that if there was something grown by my great-grandfather, then, I think I'd be scared to cut a branch off. But, this thing we had to do some serious bending on branches and trunk bending and pad placement and wiring and all that led into conversations about, branch positioning and then pad development as well. How do you develop a pad on a tree? Which I was shown, and I thought I had it a certain way, but then when you learn and the finesse and the correct techniques for these things, it looks a lot different. It has a different feel to it, and it feels more right, more correct to be doing it a certain way. And this is all part of learning in bonsai, is that you come across these things and you pick up on them and you can run with them and put your own flair on it, but you don't know what you don't know. And that was some of the stuff that I'd learned, and my notes were all about, filler branches and high branches and pad volume. And until that point, a lot of the pads that I'd made on my trees were always like flat saucers, and I wasn't understanding or didn't have the knowledge to know about pad volume and how to build that up and how to maximise the space requirements for a pad. And so that was sort of stuff that I'd learnt. There was I remember even the branch positioning to set a pad, rather than doing it from sort of a front-on view where you're looking at the side of the pad, you have the pad and the branch flowing directly towards your chest, and you build the pad from there, and that way you get an even shape about it. So rather than focusing on what something's going to look like from its end image, you focus on what it looks like as an independent branch, and you make that perfect. And then when you have a series of those branches that are in that symmetry or that harmony together, where they're all created individually, then when you look at it, that's when you get a beautiful bonsai. And it was like a light bulb moment for me, thinking about it like that, rather than focusing on a blob or a two-dimensional view of something for a photo for the purpose of what it looks like from the front. You make a solid tree, and that's, I come back to one of the most important things that I learned on that trip is good structure is good bonsai, and I can't reiterate that enough. That goes through my head every second of every single day when I think about bonsai. Is good structure is good bonsai, and there's no shortcuts. If you've got something that's too long, that's too thick, that's outside, there's no point snaking that back and bringing it back to make it look pretty. For now, it's like get rid of it, replace it with a bud that's back further, and develop that bud correctly to become the branch that you want. I don't work on trees to have them at the finished silhouette. I always take them back inside the silhouette, so then they can grow naturally into the silhouette that I see for that bonsai, that particular bonsai, when I'm working on a tree in the development stage. So, that was some of the stuff that I learned. I also got to have a pot purchasing frenzy, which was great. That was kid in a candy shop moment as well. Got to finally go through and I've been looking for for weeks at pots underneath benches and pulling out these nooks and crannies and finding, this one or that one or whatever, and looking for patina and, not getting cracks or chips or anything like that. And then suddenly sitting down and saying, okay, yeah, well, that one there, that's a Japanese antique and that's over 100 years old. And that one there, that's only 30 to 40 years old. And it's like, wow, 30 to 40, that's amazing. But they're like, it's only young, it's new Japanese, Or, there's this one's from Tokonami, and you get to know the makers' names and it's like a whole nother rabbit hole to tear down his pots. And, I love them. I think that, I said it before, I said it again, got a great bonsai, it deserves a great pot in some shape or another. So that was definitely part of it. But then, the sponge side of my learning really opened up over that last segment of my time there. Got to talk about developing, root over rock trees and the technique that they use over there, and it was amazing. I go there with the limited knowledge that I had before leaving Australia, and got to go there saying, oh, okay, so root over rock, this is what we do, and it's like, no, and it's like, okay, make a mental reset. No. Don't talk about what we do. Sit there as a sponge and go, well, tell me the technique. How do you guys do it, and how have you done it for the last century of tree development? Because yours are incredible, and I want to know how you guys do that. And that was all part of the learning, that how they position trees on the rocks when they're young, and they put steel around the roots to firmly clasp them against the rock, and then they allow them to grow and bury the rock fully underground, and then over a period of time slowly start to expose the rock and apply more steel around those roots. And it's one of those things that there's no rush for it. It's not done in a month, it's not done in 2 months, it's not done in 3 months, it's not done in 3 years, it's not done in 5 years. It just takes such a long time to create beautiful bonsai that you can start them at any point in time. It's whether you finish them within your lifetime, which is what I've come to realise with a lot of stuff that I've got in my collection, no matter what stage it's at, and how beautiful I consider it to be right now and how much I enjoy it. Would I ever think there would be finished? I don't know. I don't think so. I really don't. Doesn't mean you can't appreciate them. Doesn't mean I can't love them. Doesn't mean I can't, give it 110% every time I put it in front of me. But would I think that something like that is, some of these trees that I've grown as root over rock, would I ever think that they're going to be finished trees? No. Would they be display worthy in bonsai shows? Yeah, of course. Would they impress anyone that walks through the yard that's maybe doesn't know bonsai quite as well, or even sometimes when they do? Yep, yeah, sure it would. Do I still see room for development? Yeah, 100%. 100% I do. And I'm sure that you people listening that you'd look at your trees too and see potential for change or for development. No matter how high end they are, there's always something. And that's part of this last section that I wanted to really take home with me, was that there's a way to develop your trees, and there's a focus that we have on our trees that when we start working through them, but they're never done. So you never sit back, relax, and have a glass of wine, look at it and go, yep, done, finished, put that one on the pile. I've got nothing more to learn from that tree, because that's never going to happen. The learning might scale back, or the development of the tree might scale back, but there's always going to be something that you can take from that tree. Whether you get bored with it, whether you feel that you've lost connection with the tree, that's another thing. But as far as the development of the tree, it just never stops. One of the most important things, I suppose, that was refocused, or was my focus of that first journey to Japan, was focusing in on the stage of development of bonsai. And for me, being from a relatively young bonsai country compared to Japan, and me personally being young in bonsai, that it was really important for me to nut it out that the order of development that is, it should be your focus when you work with any of your bonsai, because you can't jump from one to the next before you've finished the previous stage of development. So, trunk and nabari. So the base root system and the lower trunk, or the trunk development, the trunk shape, That's number one. You can't move on to step 2 until number 1 is done, because the number 2 is your primary branches. So you set your primary branches and you wire them out. Now, as soon as you start putting scissors or branch cutters onto your bonsai, onto your tree, the thickening process stops, right? So if you're still developing a trunk from its girth point of view, girth perspective and taper, then really your focus has got to be on that alone, because you can't be working the branches as well as the trunk. You've got to get the trunk right and then go, right, now that's done, tick. It's not going to develop too much more than what it is now. Now move on to the primary branches. So once you get your primary branches right, and that's talking about the placement, the wiring, the positioning, but also the taper of those branches and the thickness of those branches. Once you've got that set, then you move on to the third part, which is the secondary branching. Because if you're, let's say for instance, it's a lower branch and you want it thicker, and you start working on the secondary branching on that tree, it means you've got to start cutting things back, which means you stop the thickening process, which means the primary branch development really comes to almost a halt. You can use sacrifice branches to continue doing both hand in hand, but your focus primarily has to be those primary branches that you've got there. Doesn't mean the whole tree's got to be in that phase all at once. You might find that your upper branches, you move very quickly through the stages of primary branches, secondary branches, and the last is the ramification, your tertiary branches, your twiggy silhouette, for want of a better description. That's the final step in the development of your trees. So once you've got the rest of it done, that's when you start working on that. Now, I've got trees which are covering off on stages 2, 3, and 4 all at one time. So lower branches, I'm still working on the primary branches, and I've still got secondary branches in there, but my immediate focus is on the thickening process, so long sacrifice branches running from that area. Whereas halfway up the tree, secondary branches have been worked out. So now I'm just about to move on to the fourth stage, the ramification. Whereas the top of the tree, the apex, the strongest part, the part that I want to be least thick, I've been pruning that for ages, and I've been ramifying that for a long time. So I've got a really nice twiggy silhouette at the top. I've got secondary branches, primary and secondary branches, so it looks a bit thinner in that middle section of the tree. The lower part of the tree just looks like these big long shoots that are taking off, trying to thicken branches. But the branches are getting there, and once I'm completely satisfied that I've got them to the thickness and shape and positioning that I want, then off will come the sacrifice branches. Then I'll start working on the secondary branches and move along the path to the ramification. So that's that was something which was a really strong focus of my whole trip. And if I could take sort of anything away from it, it's that good structure is good bonsai. Good structure comes from that 4-step process when you're thinking and looking at your trees in part of the process. So another part of the trip was the experiences that you get. So not just the learnings, but the experience. I got to meet Bonsai Boone. He came over with a crew of people, and we did road trips with him, and it was really nice because just after I got back from the trip in Japan, he actually came to my hometown of Melbourne and was presenting at National AABC bonsai convention here too. So it was great actually to catch up with him, in a relatively short period after I was in Japan. I got to see him and say hello again in Australia. And I think that was, again, that the whole world's a small place thing really came to the fore with that trip, that it is. And, you should never be daunted by something like that. You should embrace something like that and take it on. And, there was a period right at the end of my stay, which was great because, there was the time there, as I said, I immersed myself in it and I threw myself and said, right, it's not what I do at home, it's what I do, the way that they do things. So they work very long hours, they work very hard, they get very little time off at all, day a month or so is the norm. The rest of the time they're working and it's just bonsai. So that was like, yep, I'm going there for that. I'm not going there to work, a few hours a day and then go and sightsee around the local area or travel or anything like that. It's purely to do bonsai, and that meant there was no real downtime. A little bit after dinner where we'd sit in the workshop and chit chat and whatever else, but it was sort of no socializing side of things. So I got to sit in the workshop after, right at the very, I think it was almost the last night that I was there, and we all got to share a beer in the workshop, and that was really nice. That was really nice to sit down and have a beer with Mr. Tanaka and the guys that were apprentices there at the time, and just have a yak. And it's one of those memories that just sticks with you. It's just a beer. It's nothing. It's not the end of the world, but it was actually really nice to be in that environment and sort of just sit back and relax and reflect in my own mind at how much I'd seen and how much I'd done and what I'd experienced, and it was incredible. And it's like I said, that was there was all formalities at the end of it with saying goodbye and all the rest of it, which was really nice, and travelling home was an ordeal. 3 planes to get home and nearly 24 hours of travelling nearly killed me, but would I do it all again? Yeah, in a heartbeat. I would go back and I would start my life in bonsai, definitely on that path 100% again. And like I said, it was like opening a can of worms for me, because that was just the first trip of many that I did at different times over a period to learn as much as I could bonsai and sponge it all up. And every time I went was exactly the same approach. It was exactly the same philosophy that I used, was immerse yourself in the culture and go for it, and nothing's no, everything's yes. And you go there without preconceived ideas, and you build on what you've got. You keep adding to the knowledge that you've got in your head. And I think that's what we should all do with our bonsai is, consider where we are now, and when you get the opportunity to learn, take it with both hands, and don't let go of it, because it's the most valuable thing that you've got, whether it's learning from negative experiences or hurtful experiences like what I talked about with the summer failures a bit earlier in the podcast, or whether it's something else, then everything's a learning experience, whether it's something that you'll never do again because of a result, or whether it's something that you'll do because you trust the person that's told you and you want to get to a certain point, and it's a real, hey, trust me, this will be okay because this is my experience and this is what the result is, then take it with both hands. But yeah, it was certainly amazing. I remember it was a sad, melancholic day, packing my bags the night before to go home, because I was so excited to get home to my family, to my lovely wife and beautiful children, that I was chafing at the bit. But I was also sad to leave that environment, because it was like, well, when are you going to get a chance to do this again? When's this going to happen? And like I said, I was really fortunate that I made it happen. I didn't let things hold me back from doing it, and I feel that I really got the most out of it. But yeah, truly an incredible experience. Thank you for listening in. Hope you've enjoyed the podcast again. As I said, there's definitely increase in the frequency of these things, because I love them, and they're really well received too, from all the feedback. So if you do want to get in touch, as always, through the socials, Instagram, Facebook, just shoot me a message, and I'll get back to you in any shape or any form that I possibly can to help, because I really mean that I'd love to help in any way I can. So ask any questions that you've got. I do appreciate the continued support that comes through the social media stuff that I post as well, and it's really nice to know that the bonsai community is really positive, really nice. I know there are negative things that happen in life, but for me this is one of the best. So thank you very much, and I will keep this rolling forward. On a personal front, I've got a lot happening this year. I've got travel interstate to see different bonsai clubs. There's a big National Bonsai Convention in Perth in May that I'm heading to as well. There's stuff in Brisbane, there's stuff in Adelaide. So I'm travelling all over Australia for bonsai, which is absolutely incredible. And there's also plans in place at the moment that I'm working on to do Japanese and worldwide, basically, bonsai tours and visits. So that's something that will be developed and worked on, so I can provide some access to things that I've learnt and seen, and give people the experiences of overseas travelling and seeing incredible bonsai that may not be available for you. It just may be a bucket list thing for people to tick off. So that's also in the works. So I look forward to letting you know more details as it comes to hand. But thank you for sticking around, and until next time, as always, happy bonsai.